Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation on Greece, the Macedonian Empire, and Alexander the Great. My name is William Cooper. I'm the grandson of Frida Cooper, who is an Amica resident that passed away on July 7th of last year. I miss her, but I'm making my monthly presentations at Amica in her honor. We're continuing our travels to Afro-Eurasia, which covers 57% of the world's land area, but has 86% of its population. We began in the Middle East, then we went to Southern Asia, then Southeast Asia, then Central Asia, East Asia, North Asia and Eastern Europe, again to Eastern Europe, and last month we again visited Eastern Europe, and today we're completing our travels to Eastern Europe with Greece, the Macedonian Empire, and Alexander the Great. Bon voyage. And next month we're beginning our travels to Western Europe with Italy, the Roman Empire, Vatican City, and San Marino. So I hope to see you again on the 1st of September. Before we start, the world fascinates me. On one hand, it's big with almost 200 countries, 700 spoken languages, about 300 writing systems, and nearly 4,000 recognized faiths. On the other hand, many countries were colonized by empires, shared conflicts, and were parties to treaties designed to settle them. We're learning how interconnected countries are, and how treaties designed to fix their problems created new ones. Our knowledge of history enables us to understand today's conflicts, including relations between countries. Last month, we visited the former Yugoslavia, a country with 6 republics, including North Macedonia. Today's presentation is on Greece. There are historical conflicts between Greeks with Macedonians, Turks, and Russians that continue to today. We will also learn how the Macedonian Empire conquered Greece and about Macedonia's controversy with Greece. We will highlight Alexander the Great and his immense past empire. We will also learn about the 4 past empires that controlled Greece. Let's begin. So there are 6 sections to today's presentation. Section 1, Ancient Greece. Let's begin with a quick explainer of what happened in it.
Art, philosophy, democracy, and heroes. These are just a few achievements of the legendary civilization known as Ancient Greece. Ancient Greece was born on the shores of the Aegean Sea about 4,000 years ago. In over a millennium, it expanded to lands as far west as Spain and as far east as India. Throughout this age of empire, the ancient Greeks made political, militaristic, and cultural achievements that resonated long after their empire fell. Part of the ancient Greeks' legacy involved politics, one of which was the political system of Greece itself. Unlike many nations that were under unified rule, Greece was a collection of over 1,500 territories that acted as sovereign nations. Called city-states, these territories had their own rulers and sometimes fought each other. Another political development was the institution of the first large-scale democracy. Developed in the city-state of Athens, democratic rule was a way to give the Greek people representation and political power. The Greeks also earned a strong reputation for their military. The military helped expand the Greek Empire by establishing colonies overseas, and it protected Greece itself from foreign invaders like the Persian Empire. When such a threat occurred, city-states united to defend their homeland. Many Greeks, particularly in Sparta, took immense pride in their military and regarded their soldiers as heroes. Their heroism was often turned into legend, thanks to literary works like the Iliad. War heroes also inspired the creation of the Olympics, which celebrated physical competition. Of all aspects of ancient Greek civilization, their cultural contributions left a considerable mark on the Western world. Particularly noteworthy were the ancient Greeks' art and architecture. They created incredible sculptural works such as standing figures and reliefs. Plus, they developed 3 types of columns and incorporated them to structures like the Parthenon. This artistry was imitated by other civilizations and spread throughout the globe for thousands of years. How the Greeks interpreted the world was also reflected in other cultures. Greek religion, which was comprised of many anthropomorphic deities, helped shape the spiritual beliefs of the Etruscans and later the ancient Romans. Greek philosophy, which explored matters of reason, ethics, and natural law, influenced later civilizations' achievements in politics and science. Greek language made quite an impact as well. Ancient Greek, at about 3,400 years old, provided the basis of many modern languages. The English language alone has thousands of words with Greek roots. Ancient Greece's artistry, regard for heroes, and democratic rule left a considerable impression on world history. With contributions that lasted for millennia, the civilization of ancient Greece is nothing short of legendary.
One of the key wars during ancient Greece was called the Trojan War, between the Greeks and the people of Troy, which was a city in what is now Turkey. But there are no factual records about what actually happened, only legends. So one of the reasons why this conflict may have happened was because Troy was very wealthy because it taxed and tolled ships and travelers. So this could have interfered with Greek trade, and this could have provoked the Greeks. But another reason, which seems more likely, is that Paris, son of King Priam of Troy, fell in love with Helen, the wife of Spartan king Menelaus. So Paris went to Greece and won Helen's love and persuaded her to flee with him to Troy and refused to return her to Menelaus. And you may have also heard of the Trojan horse, which was a huge, hollow, and wooden construction. So the Greeks were able to win the war using it, as some warriors hid inside while the rest of them pretended to surrender. So while the horse was taken inside Troy, at night the rest of the Greeks returned and they conquered the city. Now the video also talks about the Olympics, which first began in 776 BC in Olympia, and they were held for almost 1,200 years. But they were banned by the Romans in 393 AD, but brought back in 1896 in Athens. In 650 BC, the Greek tyrants came to power, but they were eventually overthrown by a group of exiles, and democracy returned. One of these key examples of democracy was Athenian democracy, where all male citizens had equal political rights, freedom of speech, and the opportunity to participate in politics. And what differentiated from today's politics is how it was a direct democracy, so the people directly controlled all parts of the political process. The Greco-Persian Wars were also mentioned in the video. They began when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered the Greek-inhabited region of Ionia. And because of the wars, Persia lost European territory and army strength. Now, Macedonian Greece is section 2, and the reason why it's included in part of Greece, in ancient Greece, is because we have to note that Macedonia controlled Greece. So Macedonia, also known as Macedon, was founded and ruled by the royal Argead dynasty, and they conquered Greece and ruled it under the Macedonian Empire. So their first leader was Philip II, who defeated Athens and Thebes on Macedonia's behalf. And he always planned to conquer Persia, but this never happened because he was assassinated. So as Philip II was king of Macedonia, Greece was technically part of the Macedonian Empire. You would never think that a small country today would be able to conquer Greece, but it did. And he left the throne to his son, Alexander the Great, which you definitely have heard of. Let's watch this video about his life.
Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great, is one of the most enticing and popular historical figures. His brief but intense life, the transcendence of all of his conquests and victories, and the radical changes he brought about in the world in which he lived, has led to the publication of many works in recent centuries on everything related to his life and work. Alexander the Great was born in Pella, a city located in the political centre of Macedonia, in the summer of 356 BC. He was the son of Olympias and King Philip II. Of all of Alexander's childhood teachers and instructors, none is as famous or as important as Aristotle, who was well versed in history, literature, geography, mathematics, ethics, politics, philosophy, and medicine. Alongside this comprehensive education, Alexander's childhood was balanced with hard physical training. In 336 BC, as a result of a conspiracy, Alexander's father was murdered. At just 20 years old, Alexander, who had already shown some military maturity, knew he had to move fast if he wanted to secure succession on the throne. First, he seized the palace of Egas, pronouncing himself king. Backed by Antipatro, one of his father's most senior generals, he received the oath of allegiance from the nobility and representatives of the army. Once he had avenged his father's death, he secured his own future by taking out his potential rivals. Thus, Alexander had his half-brother Carano and his cousin Amica IV executed. In addition, he sent a man he fully trusted, Hecateo of Cardia, to Asia to finish off Attalo, who was the commander-in-chief of the Macedonian army in that region. Meanwhile, his mother, the ruthless Olympias, had Philip's last wife, the niece of Attalo, Cleopatra Eurydice, and also his young daughter, Europa, murdered. With the throne assured, the Macedonian turned to his neighbours. In a rapid campaign of just a few weeks, almost all of Greece bent the knee and accepted Alexander as its new leader in the coming war against the Persian Empire. Before returning home, Alexander the Great visited the Oracle of Delphi to perform something that would be repeated many times in his coming campaigns, to seek the support of the local gods in order to justify his conquests. Having consolidated his power in Macedonia and Greece, during the spring of 334 BC, Alexander marched to Asia to lead the troops. A colossal army of 37,000 troops, consisting of 12,000 soldiers from the Macedonian phalanx, 3,000 of the royal guard, the Hypaspists, 1,800 soldiers from the elite cavalry, the Hetairoi, and 9,000 infantry and cavalry soldiers provided by their Greek allies, as well as special light infantry units from Illyria and Thrace. Not only did he have a powerful land army, but when the time came, he would also have a powerful fleet of about 200 ships. Alexander's first great victory against the Persians took place on the river Beja in 334 BC. He then marched along the southern coast of Turkey, conquering cities such as Sardes, Ephesus, Miletus, and Halicarnassus. In practice, this would mean that in just over a year, the Macedonian conqueror would have most of the Anatolian peninsula under his thumb. The Persian king, Darius III, worried that he could not stop Alexander's progress. He assumed command, seeking a victory in a ground battle that ended up being decisive. However, in 333 BC, he suffered a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Issus. Then, Alexander decided to go down the Syro-Palestine Strip before entering the heart of the Persian Empire, with the intention of depriving them of the naval bases they had in that area. In this way, Alexander the Great's conquests continued to spread throughout the Mediterranean coast, including Syria, Phoenicia, and Gaza. Alexander then stopped in Egypt to liberate its ancient civilization from the Persian yoke. After passing through Pelusium, or Memphis, Alexander was proclaimed pharaoh. Years later, with the rise to power of his general, Ptolemy, a new dynasty of Macedonian origin would rule the fate of Egypt for 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty. To win over his people, his priests, and even his gods, Alexander made a stop at the Suia oasis to visit the Oracle of Ammon that proclaimed his divine origin. The Macedonian tried not to impose too much change in Egypt and did not alter its provincial divisions nor its traditions. Nothing would be as it had before them. In the Nile Delta, off the coast, he founded Alexandria in 331 BC, a city named after himself, conceived from its origin as the best showcase for the west of Egypt's richness and cultural and economic splendor. Alexandria soon became one of the most important cities not only in Egypt, but throughout the ancient world. According to sources, some 600,000 inhabitants lived there at the end of the Hellenistic period. That very same year, Alexander's conquests led him to Mesopotamia. Taking advantage of Alexander's stay in Egypt, the Persian king, Darius, had assembled a powerful army. But his overwhelming numerical superiority was of no use during the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander emerged victorious thanks to his expertise as a strategist. The battle, which meant Macedonia's ultimate defeat, actually meant the end of the Persian Empire, since after this battle, all of the actions of Darius III would be of flight and defense. After this important success, Babylon and Susiana surrendered. In quick succession, Alexander took Pasargadae and Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire. Due to the unstoppable advance of the Macedonian conqueror, Darius III was killed by his satrap, Bessus, who then proclaimed himself king under the name of Artaxerxes. This was a great turning point in Alexander's conquests, and, with great intelligence, he adopted the title of King of Kings, and decided to avenge Darius, undertaking the persecution of Bessus. The Macedonian conqueror significantly transformed his appearance and behavior to achieve the recognition of his new eastern subjects. To do this, he began to dress in the typical clothes of the Persian kings, give his friends purple garments embroidered in gold to wear in public, and saddled the horses with the typical harnesses from the area. He created 2 chancelleries, one European and one Eastern, dispatched with the royal seal of Darius III. He also surrounded himself with a rich entourage of local nobles who worshipped him, and even formed a harem with hundreds of women and eunuchs. In the following months, he subdued and occupied Hyrcania, Aria, Drangiana, Prothasia, and Aracusia, and reached the Kabul Valley, in what is now Afghanistan. Bessus would not escape for much longer, as he was caught by Alexander on his way through Sogdiana, the northernmost satrapy of the empire, where the now dry Aral Sea is located. After several years dedicated to the construction and fortification of cities, the pacification of all that is now the area of Iran, and the fight against internal rebellions in his own army for the growing despotism of his reign, Alexander pushed on into India in 327 BC. Unlike the Persian Empire, India at that time lacked centralized power and was divided amongst many peoples and kingdoms. No doubt an exciting challenge for Alexander. He did not stop. He penetrated into the Indo Valley, crossed the Jhelum and the Bias rivers, defeated local kings, and claimed lands where no other Western person had ever been before. However, the larger and more unmanageable the Alexandrian Empire became, the more dissatisfaction there was within his army. This was understandable. They had been away from home for years, although many had formed families in the conquered areas, as Alexander favoured mixed races. Eventually, the Macedonian had no choice but to begin his return to the west, conquering many more places along the way. By 324 BC, Alexander was back in Persepolis, and in 323 BC, he had settled in Babylon, a city where he began numerous works to fill the city with majestic new monuments that illustrated his greatness, engraving his name in stone for all eternity. In that same city, on the night of June 10th, 323 BC, he died of an unknown disease at the age of 32. Other hypotheses talk of poison. The death of Alexander the Great had such an impact that it is often taken as fact that the history of ancient Greece begins with the Hellenistic period. Gone were great projects such as conquering Arabia, the land of myrrh and incense, a key place in trade between the East and the Mediterranean. The civilizing project dreamed of by the Macedonian had vanished before it was realized. Ambitious, passionate and calculating, generous and yet cruel, the invincible Alexander, whom posterity would know as the Great, had ridden thousands of miles on the back of his horse, Bucephalus, with the idea of forming a gigantic empire that generated a universal character. An empire that, by the way, would end up being one of the shortest in history, and it would be divided up amongst his generals.
So as the video said, after his death, the Hellenistic period began, and Greece entered a 40-year period of chaos and was divided in four. The kingdom of Egypt, the Seleucid Empire, the kingdom of Pergamon, and Macedon. During Greece's downfall, the Romans seized the perfect opportunity to invade, and they seized the country in the Roman conquest of 146 BC. And under Roman rule, Corinth was established as the capital, while Athens flourished as a hub of philosophy, education, and knowledge. In 395 AD, as the Romans decided that their empire was too big to be ruled by one emperor, it was split into two, the Western and Eastern Roman empires, while the latter became known as Byzantium, thus beginning the period of Byzantine Greece. Byzantium was created by Constantine the Great, who relocated the capital to Constantinople, named after him. The empire prospered significantly because it controlled rich trade routes between the Black Sea and the Aegean, and it was able to conquer parts of northern Africa and Italy. However, after centuries of riches, they met their eventual decline in the 11th century. In 1208, the Venetians took most of the mainland, and the Byzantine period officially ended in 1453 when the Ottomans seized Constantinople, thus beginning the period of Ottoman Greece. During the Ottoman period, Christianity was incredibly suppressed, and Greece almost lost its Orthodox culture. Greek peasants faced heavy discrimination, unfair taxation, and the loss of civil rights. Greece was now fed up, so in 1821, they declared independence. Modern Greece. So they declared the First Hellenic Republic under the Greek War of Independence, which was originally a conflict that everybody expected the Ottomans to win, as Greece was small and the Ottomans were huge. However, it enlarged into a conflict involving Britain, Russia, and France in 1826, which were instrumental for Greece's success. And it ended with the Treaty of Adrianople, which gave Greece the autonomy that it wanted. During the war, a provisional government was created, called the First Hellenic State, that lasted until 1832, when Greece was given its full independence and a new government was established. Afterwards, the provisional government was no longer needed. Greece is a sovereign state. This was because of the Treaty of Constantinople, which gave Greece its full independence, and in a conference with Britain, Russia, and France, Prince Otto of Bavaria was appointed king. As we've learned over our previous presentations, the Balkan Wars were a precursor to World War I. World War I and World War II could be thought of as a 30-year war because the harsh treaties and territorial divisions fueled German motivation for another conflict. Several former countries, including Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, created by post-war treaties, fell apart by the end of the century, causing devastating consequences for several people groups that still persist to today. The Balkan Wars were a precursor and cause of World War I, as they heightened tensions in an already unstable region. Since Russia wanted access to the Mediterranean Sea from the Black Sea and wanted to weaken its Austrian and Ottoman enemies, they pursued a pan-Slavic foreign policy and thus supported Bulgaria and Serbia. Let's watch this quick refresher about the Balkan Wars.
In the 19th century, the Ottomans faced numerous nationalist movements. In the Balkans, the Greeks were the first to gain their independence in 1832. Over the following decades, Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro were granted full independence. The Bulgarians were rewarded with their own principality, and the Austro-Hungarians occupied Bosnia. Wars between Bulgaria and Serbia and the Ottomans in Greece encouraged the nations to strengthen their armies. Yet, the nationalist rebellions within the Ottoman Empire continued. Then, in 1908, the Young Turk Revolution restored the constitution to the Ottoman Empire. However, the resulting chaos allowed the Bulgarians to finally proclaim their full independence and, under Tsar Ferdinand, develop a large army. The Austrians also fully annexed Bosnia, putting an end to the Serbian hopes of expanding north. Then, Albanian uprisings threatened Serbian expansion south. These Albanian uprisings corresponded with the Italian invasion of Libya in 1911, a war which demonstrated that the great powers had no intention to preserve the Ottoman Empire and showed the Ottomans were weak. Now the Balkan nations saw they could win and take over the Ottoman territories they desired. So the Serbians signed an alliance with the Bulgarians, promising them southern Macedonia after the war. Greece, fearing they'd be left out of the territorial games, soon made alliances in mid-1912, and finally Montenegro, just a minor power, entered into these alliances and the Balkan League was formed. The nations began to mobilize, and Montenegro declared war on the Ottomans in early October 1912. They were joined by their allies on the 17th of October, just before the Italians made peace with the Ottomans. The Greek strong navy prevented Ottoman reinforcements from arriving in Europe, and this allowed the Balkan allies to make quick gains. In just over a month, the Bulgarians had advanced south to the Aegean Sea and also laid siege to Adrianople. The Serbians pushed south into Albania, Montenegrins expanded west, and the Greeks moved north and took Salonika. Also, in late November, the Albanians in Vlora declared their independence. The Bulgarians tried to take Constantinople, however their assault was repulsed, so, along with Serbia and Montenegro, they signed an armistice with the Turks in early December and peace talks began. However, Adrianople remained under siege and the Greeks continued fighting in northern Epirus. Meanwhile, in Constantinople, the Committee of Union and Progress, led by Enver Pasha, feared Adrianople would be given to Bulgaria, so staged a coup in January 1913, and this brought Bulgaria, Serbia and Montenegro back into the conflict. The Bulgarians fought off an Ottoman counterattack, and then in March, Ioannina fell to the Greeks and the Bulgarians took Adrianople. The Ottomans were finally forced to make peace at the Conference of London, which was overseen by the great powers. The Turks' European territory was divided, but a lot of disputes emerged. Firstly, Albania was granted independence, but they didn't receive as much land as they hoped for. Also, Albanian independence angered the Serbians, who had occupied their lands. So the Serbians, seeing they would achieve very little otherwise, withdrew from their previous agreements with the Bulgarians and continued to occupy southern Macedonia. So knowing how Bulgaria would react, Serbia signed a defensive alliance with the Greeks. Also, the Romanians feared the growing Bulgarian threat, so claimed the town of Silistria, and with great powers granted it to them. So now, facing encirclement and the loss of territory, Bulgaria invaded southern Serbia in June 1913, with the hopes of occupying as much land as they could before the great powers, particularly Russia, could interfere. Serbian victories prevented the Bulgarians from pushing further into Serbia, while the Greeks crossed into Bulgaria from the south. Then, on the 10th of July, the Romanians entered into the war, citing their concerns over Bulgaria's ambitions. They marched across the Danube and captured Varna, meeting very little resistance. This convinced the Ottomans, who hoped to reclaim their lost provinces, to enter the war as well. Now the Bulgarians were surrounded and the situation became untenable. They were driven out of Serbia and then all four nations began pushing into Bulgaria. With Sofia threatened, the Bulgarians sued for peace. Romania took southern Dobruja, Greece expanded to the Nestos River, Serbia cemented its control over Vardar Macedonia, and the Ottomans retook Adrianople. The wars emboldened the Serbians, and this worried the Austrians. It also strained Austro-Russian relations, and the tensions would boil over when Gavrilo Princip shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, beginning World War I. Plus, the wars also guaranteed that during the First World War, Bulgaria would join the Central Powers in the fight against Serbia and Russia.
So in the aftermath of the Balkan Wars, Greece doubled its size and gained most of its present territory. They were given most of it: Epirus, Macedonia, Crete, and the northern Aegean islands. Russia's interest in the Balkans spurred America's foreign policies, including the Truman Doctrine. World War I. As we've learned, there were 6 main causes. The first was European expansionism, as imperialism heightened tensions among countries. Second, Serbian nationalism, as Slavic Serbs wanted independence as well as unification with Bosnia. Third, Franz Ferdinand's assassination by a Bosnian Serb, which allowed Austria to declare war on Serbia, and Russia came to Serbia's aid, initiating World War I. Fourth, interlocking alliances which were caused in case of war and were triggered, resulting into the two sides. And these two are linked to Germany and are why historians say that Germany took most of the blame. We have fifth, blank check assurance, where Germany gave Austria-Hungary their full support after Franz Ferdinand's assassination, which gave Austria the confidence it needed to declare war. And finally, German millenarianism, also known as the spirit of 1914, as most of the population supported participation and the government believed that it would secure their place as a leading world power. Who fought in the war? So Greece was on the side of the Allies, which were against the Central Powers. During the war, there was a series of disagreements between the king and the prime minister, called the National Schism. During the war, Greece was originally neutral, but the prime minister wanted to join the Allies, while the king supported remaining neutral. Since Greece and Serbia were in a treaty alliance, once Bulgaria invaded Serbia, the prime minister thought that they would be able to send the army to protect Serbia, but he was unable to as he was accused of treason by the king. However, in 1917, the king gave in and they joined the Allies. During the war, there were the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916, where Britain double-crossed the Arabs. Although Britain promised the Arabs Ottoman territory if they helped the Allies, there was a secret agreement with the French to split it up for themselves. And this is the reason why people blame Britain today for the issues in the Middle East. And it was modified into the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, after the war. In 1917, there was a Second Russian Revolution, which began Bolshevik rule. On November 11, 1918, the war ended with the armistice. Post-World War I. So after World War I, there was the Greco-Turkish War during the partitioning of the Ottoman Empire, as Greece was told that the Allies had promised them territory, so they thought that they were allowed to invade. They were even able to take most of western and northwestern Turkey, but the Turks eventually won, and they forced them to return to their past borders. As we know, there were 6 treaties after World War I, but for the sake of this presentation, we'll only focus on the last 2, relating to the Ottomans and Greece. So the Treaty of Sèvres with the Ottomans was very ambitious. It wanted to give territory to Greece, Italy, France, the UK, a United Arabian States, Armenia, and it even had a plan for a united Kurdistan. But people saw that it was too ambitious, and the Turks did not agree with it. So it was not respected and resulted with the Treaty of Lausanne, which gave Turkey its modern-day borders, and it also got rid of the idea of a united Kurdistan. In 1922, the Soviet Union was formed, and communism was starting to spread across Europe and Asia. On March 25, 1924, there was a referendum about abolishing monarchy, which passed, and King George II was exiled, and the Second Hellenic Republic was proclaimed. However, in 1925, General Theodore Pangalos led a coup and established a dictatorship. However, he was later overthrown in a military rebellion. Despite a period of stability and a sense of well-being, so the severe effects of the Great Depression were beginning to be felt in Greece, and political instability returned. So army officers overthrew the government in a coup d'etat and brought back King George II. In April of 1936, Metaxas was appointed prime minister. However, on the 4th of August 1936, he was given dictatorial powers under the 4th of August regime, which was very important among the Greeks. In 1938, he was appointed head of government for life. World War II. So we all know that World War II began when Germany invaded Poland and the Soviets came to their aid. But in this presentation, we're going to talk about how Greece was involved. So the Italians had Albania, and they wanted Greece to surrender strategic posts and allow them to pass through. However, Metaxas declined, so the Italians invaded. However, the Greeks were incredibly powerful, and they pushed the Italians back. The Nazis had to come in to help the Italians, and the Greek government was evacuated to Crete. The government had to then flee to Egypt after the Nazis got all of Greece. And after the Italians transitioned to the Allies, the Germans established a puppet regime known as the Hellenic State. However, in October of 1944, they were liberated by the National Liberation Front. However, the British tried to bring back the royals, who were at that time in exile, despite communist protests. World War II ended after Japan's surrender. Post-World War II. So after World War II, for Greece, there was another big war called the Greek Civil War. And it was between the monarchists and the communists. After World War II, since Britain was running out of money, the United States began providing aid to the royals, and they even allowed them to join NATO in the late parts of the war. Since Greece was the only capitalist Balkan nation left at the time, the U.S. feared that it would fall due to the domino theory in the Truman Doctrine. Now, we're always talking about the Truman Doctrine, but what necessarily was it?
Hello and welcome to History Pod. On the 12th of March 1947, US President Harry S. Truman called for economic and military aid to Greece and Turkey in what became known as the Truman Doctrine. The aftermath of the Second World War saw Greece rocked by civil war between the royal government and the leftist National Liberation Front, who were supported by neighbouring communist Yugoslavia. Meanwhile, in Turkey, the government there had been under pressure from the USSR over access to the strategic waterways that linked the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. In an attempt to limit communist expansion into Europe, the British government provided economic and military assistance to both the Greek and Turkish governments. However, in February 1947, Britain informed the US government that it couldn't afford to continue this support while they faced their own economic crisis at home, and that they would stop providing aid on the 31st of March. In what later became known as the domino theory, Truman's advisors explained that if either Greece or Turkey fell to communism, then it could spread to the rest of Europe and Asia. To avoid this, they urged policymakers to take Britain's place and provide support to the two governments. On the 12th of March, President Truman appeared before a joint session of Congress where he laid out the threat. Among other things, he stated, "It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures." In a program that won broad support, America committed to providing $400 million in assistance to Greece and Turkey. This established the Truman Doctrine that would guide US policy and relations with the USSR for the next 40 years.
In 1967, there was a coup d'etat, where the military junta overthrew the government, and a conservative, authoritarian dictatorship was established. However, in 1973, there was another coup on top of this, which established the Third Hellenic Republic. And it still lasts to today. In 1981, Greece joined the European Union. Now let's talk about Cyprus, a small island nation with an incredible history. So Cyprus has been controlled by many different rulers. It was first under the Romans, then the Byzantines, then the English, then French Crusaders, then the rulers of Jerusalem, then the Venetians, and finally the Ottomans. Britain was then given Cyprus in exchange for protecting the crumbling Ottoman Empire from Russian aggression, although it was formally still under Ottoman rule. In 1914, because of World War I, the Ottomans and the UK were on different sides, so the UK officially annexed it. Then they gave Cyprus its independence in 1960 because of different independence movements. But politicians couldn't get anything done due to gridlock because of the Greek and Turkish divide on the island. When the president of Cyprus wanted to amend the constitution, Turkey threatened to invade. However, on July 15, 1974, Greece staged a coup to overthrow the government, and 5 days later, Turkey invaded and took almost 40% of the territory. Greece then withdrew from NATO due to its inaction during the situation, but re-entered in 1981, when the government wanted to reintegrate into Western institutions. Now, this is what Cyprus looks like today. On their flag, they make it seem as if it's all one country. However, in red, we have the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. In yellow, the Greek-supported Republic of Cyprus. In green, the UN border green line. And in blue, the UK's 2 military bases that they still have to today. In 2002, Greece joined the euro currency, and this replaced the drachma, which was Europe's previously longest used currency. Now, Greece is known today for its economic troubles. So let's watch this video about the Greek financial crisis.
This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Go to skl.sh/theplainbagel to get a free the path. Yet valuable lessons are to be had by exploring their causes and effects. After all, in a world of ever-changing rules, products, and services, history is the one constant that can guide us through the ambiguity. So let's take a 5-minute history lesson on today's Plain Bagel. It's 1999, and the Greek government is in a bit of a pickle. The European Union has just launched a fancy new currency, the euro, that will be shared by its members. But even though Greece is part of the EU, they left off the invite. You see, despite massive tax evasion problems, the Greek government has been spending to boost social benefits and wages, which has caused their debt to GDP to rise well above the 60% required to adopt the currency. So now they must decide between cutting back spending or missing out on the Eurozone party. Unless, of course, there's a third option. You see, Goldman Sachs, an American investment bank, comes along with an idea. A way to meet the currency adoption criteria by masking the government's debt load through currency swaps. It involves a bit of lying, but this way the country can avoid radical reforms and reap the benefits of the euro. A win-win. So Greece gives it a shot, using the sleight of hand to adopt the currency in 2001. And sure enough, the stunt pays off. The currency brings with it more trade. And since the euro allows Greece to piggyback off the financial strength of its fellow Eurozone members, the government gains access to better financing, enough to even bring it above its home for 2004. Sure, debt to GDP continues to rise above 110%, and things are a little precarious, but hey, the economy is growing, there's plenty of EU money funding the budget deficit, and so long as things keep rolling, everything will be... That's not good. Looks like a real estate crisis in the US has triggered a global recession, and it's hitting Greece like a train. GDP is falling as tourism and shipping slow down, with the Athens Stock Exchange plummeting 65% in 2008. Worse yet, borrowing costs are increasing. Oh, and that shared currency we fought so hard for? Well, it's preventing Greece from stabilizing through monetary policy. And just in case things didn't look bad enough, surprise! In 2009, it's revealed that the government has been cooking the books, and its budget deficit is not 6.7%, but double that. Whoops! I mean, more than double the original estimate. Borrowing costs skyrocket as the entire country's credibility is smashed. like a plate on the floor. OPA. On April 27, 2010, with a debt to GDP of 127%, the country's credit rating is dropped to junk, plummeting Greece towards default as it begins to drown in its pile of public debt. But look, on the horizon, is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a buttload of money. The Troika, a group consisting of 2 EU entities in the International Monetary Fund, has come to bail Greece out in a bid to save the EU from the ramifications of a Greek default. Here's the plan. Lend Greece 110 billion euros to avoid default, use the bailout money to pay off expensive creditors, get the government to commit to higher taxes and lower spending to bring the country back into a surplus, and wait for this recession to blow over. So, on May 2nd, 2010, the Troika tosses Greece a lifeline, and damn. The bailout doesn't quite fix the problem. In fact, the austerity measures have put further pressure on GDP and brought debt to GDP up to 172% by 2011, with creditors quickly draining the bailout funds. This is bad, and the Troika realized that more drastic measures are required, so they devised a new plan. Give Greece another 130 billion euros, negotiate with creditors to cut the country's IOU by 53.5%, get the government to commit to further austerity measures to bring the country back into a surplus, and wait for this depression to blow over. So on February 21st, 2012, the Troika prepares the largest sovereign debt restructuring in history, tosses Greece its second lifeline, and success! The program grabs a hold, and after 2 years of further tax reforms, layoffs, and wage cuts, the government reports a structural surplus. But wait, Greece is starting to fight back. You see, the Troika's bailout terms, they're hoping the government get a handle on its debt, are causing unrest at home, with Greeks bearing the burden of falling wages, rising taxes, and unemployment above 25%. So when a snap election occurs in 2015, the people break over 40 years of two-party rule and elect a new anti-austerity party to office in a bid for change. The new Prime Minister promises to boost spending and throw down the gauntlet to the Troika to renegotiate terms, raising tensions between the government and the Troika until the country's lifeline snaps and, ladies and gentlemen, all hell breaks loose. Creditors flee Greece once again, and a liquidity crisis emerges, with fear gripping the country amid concerns of Brexit, Greece's departure from the EU. Negotiations with the Troika fall through as even its members clash, and on June 30th, 2015, with the government unable to secure any further debt relief, Greece defaults, missing a 1.6 billion euro debt payment to the IMF, the first developed country to ever do so. The foundation of Greece's economy begins to crack as the government shuts down its stock exchange and banking system. Greeks continue to fight against the new bailout proposed by the EU, but at this point, with the country in financial purgatory, Brexit inching closer, and no more leverage for negotiation, on July 16th, a very desperate government throws in the towel, grabbing a hold of the EU's third lifeline and accepting an 86 billion euro bailout in August. And so, with the fight to boost spending needing a dramatic end, the Greek people prepare once again for a round of cuts, reforms, and hard times ahead. All in, the economy was shrinking 25% as a result of the crisis. And while Greece has since finished its bailout program, the country to this day maintains a debt to GDP of 181%. And Greek people continue to suffer, with 1 in 3 Greeks at risk of living in poverty. It goes to show the terrible consequences of fiscal mismanagement. And as Greece continues down its road to recovery, let us not forget the valuable and devastating case study it provided.
Now, you may have heard that Greeks and Turks tend to not like each other, but politicians are trying to change that. Let's watch this short video about how they're trying to fix their relationship.
Historical foes Greece and Turkey hope to usher in a new era of closer ties. In a landmark visit of Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to Greece on Thursday, they agreed to pursue good neighbourly relations and work on obstacles that have kept them apart, especially in the Aegean Sea. By their acrimonious standards, Thursday's summit was a remarkable love fest without precedents. It went on longer than expected. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis addressed Erdogan as Dear Tayyip, and Erdogan said he expected to receive Mitsotakis in Ankara. This was Erdogan on Thursday.
Biz Ege'yi bir barış ve işbirliği denizi haline getirelim istiyoruz.
We want to turn the Aegean into a sea of peace and cooperation. As Turkey Greeks, we want to set an example to the whole world with the mutual steps we will take.
Açık söylüyorum.
I'm saying this openly. There is no problem between us that cannot be solved.
Hiçbir sorun yok.
It was a far cry from his last visit in 2017, when both sides reeled off a litany of grievances stretching back to the crumbling days of the Ottoman Empire over a century ago.
Ama
Chile relations thawed markedly after Greece swiftly dispatched aid in the wake of a devastating earthquake in Turkey in February. The two neighbours, who went to the brink of war in the 1990s, have long been at odds over issues including where their continental shelves start and end, energy resources, flights over the Aegean Sea, and the ethnically partitioned island of Cyprus.
Now, in the very beginning, we talked about how Greeks and Macedonians have some controversies. So Greece has accused Macedonia of appropriating symbols that they believe belong to Greece, including Alexander the Great, and of promoting the concept of united Macedonia, which would take land away from Greece and Bulgaria. Also, Macedonia is now called North Macedonia because Southern Macedonia is actually in Greece. Greece and America are excellent allies because the U.S. supported them and saved them from communism during the early days of the Cold War. Greeks and Russians have some issues. Only 28% of Greeks like Russia, and 72% don't. And there's a big conflict because Russia, during the aftermath of World War II, tried to make Greece communist, like the rest of the Balkans. But as we said, the U.S. saved them. You would think that Greece and UK would have excellent relations, as they're both developed Western European nations, and as Greece is friends with the US, they would probably be friends with the UK too. Well, they're good allies, but there's one key issue called the Elgin Marbles. Removed in the 19th century by Lord Elgin, who was Britain's ambassador to the Ottomans that controlled Greece at the time, they are now in the British Museum, although Greece has long campaigned for their eventual return. Rob Armstrong asks, please tell us about the countries in terms of the size of their economies, populations, and geography. Well, here you have a snapshot of Greece, North Macedonia, and Cyprus. Greece has the largest land area, population, and GDP, although Cyprus has the largest GDP per capita, as it's a very developed nation, especially compared to the countries surrounding it. Greece's capital is Athens, Macedonia's is Skopje, and Cyprus's is Nicosia. Rob Armstrong asks, please tell us some fun facts. Well, Rob, did you know that Greece has over 6,000 islands? It's the world's third largest olive producer, more tourists visit it than the population, and that it's 80% mountainous? I bet you didn't. Is it true that the Greeks invented Plato? Well, Rob, there was an important Greek philosopher named Plato, but we're not talking about the Plasticine. Other glorious Greeks included Aristotle, Pythagoras, Herodotus, and Homer. Rob Armstrong asks, if I travel to Greece, what site should I see? Well, if you're in Athens, you have to see the Parthenon and the Acropolis. If you're in Olympia, you have to see the Temple of Zeus and Mount Olympus. And if you love beautiful beaches and white and blue houses, you have to see the city of Mykonos. How do you say butterfly? In Greek, it's pitaluda. In Macedonian, it's peperutka. And in Turkish, it's kelebek. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Opa! That was very good, William.
Thank you, Rob.
Right up there.
scratch. That's good.
Okay.